welcome everybody. Uh, I'm so excited to have both you, Tati and Donna, here. I want to mention that one of our team uh, of public address, Stephanie Sehuko, is teaching right now. So it'll be the two of us from public address, and really thrilled to have you two join us, especially because lately we've had such an opportunity to, I don't know, feel like have conversations about what I think trying to find meaning in the current political moment. And I'm really excited that this broadcast is not in a traditional media format, but it's long form and it can be wondering. And so I feel like this is a great opportunity to talk about things in a non soundbite way. And for me, I really hope uh, that platform can be very compelling. Uh, so, Tati, would you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, okay. My name is Tati. I am an organizer with BLMT, Black Lives Matter Tampa. Also a co-founder of a new org called Sis Se Puede. Um, and yeah, I'm 22 years old, Africana Studies scholar, and I recently have relocated here to Tampa to do some work with BLM.
And can you tell us briefly about Si Se Pueda?
Si se puede, sis se puede. So sis,
Thank you.
be, yeah, because it's me and my sister, it's a sister organization. It was founded to kind of give a space to Afro Latinas while also working to kind of bridge the gap between Latin and Black communities and give kind of like a light to the fact that we share a lot of the same issues in our society, and that we should work together because in numbers
Hmm.
people are power, and in numbers we can change things.
Thank you. Donna, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Donna Davis. I am the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Tampa. I am also a political consultant slash field operative for presidential, Senate, congressional candidates gubernatorial.
Also, can you guys talk to me about your first meeting? Because Tati, you're kind of a recent arrival down south here.
Right. Yeah. Oh, how we met. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So basically I was here visiting my family, and my sister and her friends had an idea to have a protest in the Bayshore area of Fred Ball Park. And so we reached out to BLM. I had the idea to reach out to BLM so that we can organize it well and safely. And I have been involved in a little bit of organizing in DC. And so from there, we organized the Fred Ball protest, in which we had like over 5,000 people there. And it was amazing. And from there, I decided to stay and work alongside Donna and BLMT to organize protests and like social services and other things like that. So it was kind of like a spontaneous meetup, and we ended up working together from there.
Hmm. And Donna, you've been here how many years?
I came to Tampa on a campaign to work on the governor's campaign in 2014. And I came out of Brooklyn, where I was living at the time. And I thought, oh, it'll be nice to have some sunny weather. But I am from a county that's about 3 hours north of here, and I'm paid because my parents. And I got caught up. I said I wasn't going to do this. I wasn't going to do anything in Florida because I'm from Florida and I know about this place. And for my mental health and well being, I would not get involved in any work for free. And then someone introduced me to a young woman who was working on Brittany Overstreet's case. She had been body slammed by TPD peace officer in a school. I think it was a sheriff, and needed some help really trying to organize and galvanize support behind her. And I said casually, well, BLM seems to be really popular right now. That may be an opportunity for you to get people engaged under this banner. It's really exciting. So we put up a web page thinking that it was just going to get people to help Crystal with the Brittany Overstreet case, and it turned into something with a lot more influence and a lot more people, like 14 or 15,000.
Hmm. And I think it might be nice. So there's four things that I thought we could cover today, and it's up to you guys how quickly or deeply you want to go into either of those, and they're really just prompts. But what I have down here on my notepad is a kind to we're in a very particular moment right now. We're post Jacob Flake Blake. We're post convention. We're at a time where there are a lot of people who unemployment benefits are running out, eviction moratoriums are not where they need to be, and we're in this final sprint toward the election. And of course, there's a number of X factors, right, between now and the election. And of course, the day after the election, all the work continues. Um, so, first, this moment. Second, I want to hear about the current initiatives that you guys are working on. Um, when people hear Black Lives Matter Tampa, and they don't have a sort of structural sense of things that you guys have done recently or initiatives you're rolling out. The third one is literally, what do you guys how do people donate? What's the literal fundraising mechanism right now, and how can people contribute to the work that's happening down here? And the last thing, which I'm excited to talk about, is this idea of parallel lives, which is this idea um, that all the people doing the work of social justice are doing so at the expense of other potential interests and lives that they might be leading. And so maybe we could just briefly talk about Florida is, for many reasons, a kind of caricature of a state and a political situation. And so, Donna, when you say you know this place, I feel like that's a kind of wonderfully layered statement. And, I feel like a lot of people, um, Florida's hard to get to know because it's easy to make fun of in a lot of ways. But that's one of the reasons that I kind of love it too. It's a complex place. And yeah, could you speak briefly to I know this place, and you could also talk briefly about when what is Tampa? People don't know how social justice issues and Tampa, right, as a possible city that people have heard of but not been to in Florida. What does that mean?
Well, I think that as much as there was an article out a year or so ago that said the United States is more like, instead of one country, it's more like a lot of smaller countries cobbled together. If you go to an evening party in Santa Fe, New Mexico, that's going to look very different than an evening party in Gramercy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been to both. And it's going to look very different than an evening party in Clearwater, and very different from one in Seattle where everyone looks like they got dressed with the lights off. So this country and the sensibilities of the great northeastern social experiment that is New England, that happens in New England, specifically in New York City. The plantations of the South that in states like Mississippi and Louisiana that never recovered from King Cotton and having that free labor taken away. The infrastructure of those states never recovered. And you're thinking this is like 100 and some odd years now, and it just simply hasn't happened. The rugged individualists of Colorado, where I went to college and lived for 14 years. And then the Lone Star State, where everybody's polite, but there's so much racism because Sam Houston told Texans after he told them to leave the Union, he turned around and told them they needed to be polite in order to get back into the Union.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not in Texas, but you can also be killed by police brutality down there. So Florida, which brings me back to Florida. As much as the United States has several countries cobbled together, this state, and specifically Tampa, reflects a microcosm of the population and the demographics of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tampa is a snapshot economically, culturally, socially of the United States. Literally, take the United States and you scale it down, it would look exactly like Tampa. A lot of test marketing gets done here for that reason. Now, uh, in the different parts of Florida, I've heard it said that from Orlando up is Georgia. And I would kind of take Orlando out of that because of how it's changed over the last decade. And everything south of Orlando is the Spanish Caribbean.
Wow.
So, yeah, and then when you get into a place like South Beach, Miami, it would be very helpful to speak Spanish down there. And it feels very different and much more liberated with its mix of Caribbean culture, Haitian, Dominican, Trinidadian, Tobagans, Cubans, all in this nice Caribbean mix with its beautiful climate. But if you go to Duval County in political organizing, we call that the great GOP North. Very different attitudes, even different cuisine. There's not going to be mango chutney up there. People are
Mm-hmm.
going to be doing low country crab boils. And so this Florida is very different. People come here for a lot of reasons. Retirees come here because of our tax schedule. Our tax schedule is the reason why our schools fail. And so the complexities and the layers are there, and people make fun of it, but it can be very scary and dangerous for certain populations of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes a very serious thing and not just a byword. Florida can be a place that oppresses and crushes certain populations of people, like a lot of places in the South. Except I would say people say in Florida, if you've come here and you don't like the way it is, there's very much the attitude of go back to where you came from. A lot of racism, a lot of misogyny, a lot of xenophobia here. I
Ta-
know this place.
Tati, you're a new transplant, so you're listening to you is an opportunity to just get I think about your age and your perspective, and you're a new arrival. So, do you have any? Do you have any? Can you speak to that briefly?
Um, well, I don't really know much about Tampa. Um, I'm kind of learning every day how things work here. I think one thing that I can just say, and we talked about this before, is that organizing has been very hard here because it seems like nobody wants real change, that everybody just wants to come up off of um, just like this rise of activism, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't met many people who are genuinely seeking change and genuinely trying to do the work. Um, it is weird. I see that it's kind of like a city trying to be a city that is stuck in southern racist ways. It's really weird. I see the potential that Tampa can be, but I also see that it also cannot be with because there's like holding on so tight to like the old southern racist ways, the old the policing, the like speaking to Jane Castor, it's been clear to me that she's struggling in between two people, trying to be this new progressive person, but also she's a cop, you know,
Right,
and
and for
she's very
anyone who's listening, this is the mayor of Tampa, Jane Castor.
yes, yes. So I feel like she herself is very representative of Tampa. It's kind of like
Interesting.
trying to break this progressive wall while also um like other people are trying to make that wall
Hmm.
stay there very strong.
Hmm. When I went to the George Floyd protests, I was worried as I was literally walking to one of the protests about were people going to show up, right? And the response, the numbers of people, I don't know what they were, but I remember feeling like a unique swelling of pride, right? That people had were coming out at least at that particular weekend, right? And I was like, oh wow, this is maybe what it is like when people really show up, right? Like the heat is high right now, and people are kind of getting flushed out of their domestic spaces, their individual um, narratives, right? And emerging, and now we're at this moment, and I thought I'd like you guys to speak, you know, to uh, whether it's what it is to be in Tampa right now, but of course we're all balancing Tampa micropolitics with national fluid violence and media narratives. And yeah, so I thought to ask you guys to speak to this moment, which is that's like a hard prompt. Where does one start? And so, do either of you guys have a way you'd like to start that conversation?
Donnie, you want to go ahead or
Oh, this moment, like, what is it? Is that the question?
Yeah, yeah. The things
I
that have
think that,
Go ahead.
well, everyone wants to believe that the time that they're living in is unlike any other.
Mm-hmm.
And while I won't go so far as to say that there aren't aspects of this time and the zeitgeist that permeate are not similar to other times. We've had plagues before. We've had a 3-day revolution before. We've actually had revolutionary wars twice. Um, and I think that this time there's a combination of factors uh, where we're having civil unrest combined with uh, new realizations, kind of like a peeling back of the veil on things that have been accepted as status quo for many generations, like misogyny, like racism, like the entire country seems to be queer phobic and in no way trans affirming, as evidenced by death rates for trans women, life expectancy being about 35 years. Uh, there's so many conversations that we couldn't have, female sexuality, women being able to say, I don't want to be a mom, I want to be a careerist, or I want to be a stripper, and affirming female sexuality, affirming that all bodies have value, no matter their color or shape. These are conversations that we're having all at one time, and we haven't been able to have since the inception of this country. We're talking about people's abilities and the rights that a society has to accommodate them, the duty that a society has to accommodate people living with disabilities, those you can see and those you cannot. There's so many layers to this cake. And on top of that, we're having an economic downturn that is being, egged on by COVID and an uncooperative, sometimes seemingly uncaring, apathetic governing body in Washington, D.C., and in our local governing bodies. So there's so many things that are happening right now. We've seen shootings go up, we've seen suicides go up. Um, a lot of people are really are capitulating to the pressure. In a population, so many people are always going to find it difficult to cope with what the majority of people say, hey, we're going to push through this. Some people just aren't going to make it. And the longer this goes on, the more people are not being able to, feeling like they're not able to push through. And I don't think that the way our society has approached COVID-19 and the way it's approached people not being able to work is helping the general overall mental health and well-being of the general populace. So all of the problems that we had before coming into this, our status quo racism and sexism and pay equity issues and issues with people with disabilities, all of those things that are named. Um, we've got all of that, and then we've got another layer, and then we've got a serious economic problem. The only thing that we don't have, we don't have war. That's it. That would be the capstone of this whole thing. And I think people are still struggling to create. They're still struggling to elect leaders. They're still struggling to provide for their families. They're still advocating for full rights and the full complements of liberty and humanity in the middle of all of this. So I would have to say that, with the exception of the period of about 1918, where we were coming out of a war, we're about to go into a war, right?
We're
We
coming at
just
a World War One in 1918.
and then in another 15 years we're going to be churning the thing again to go back into World War II, which didn't end until the 40s.
45.
Yeah, 40. It kind of started winding down 44. So the 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 context of history says that there are features that are similar, but there's never been this many of those major aspects of a society's fundamental principles, ideas, aspects that are being challenged simultaneously. And then if you look at what's going on in Washington, most people, about half of this country, is just shaking their heads and shuddering with fear of what November the 3rd will bring. And so, having said all of that, the way our young people that haven't made a life or purchased a home or completed their educations, the way they're managing this, the way our elders who thought they would be in a different place at this time are afraid that they're going to get sick and pass away alone. Middle-aged people who just need to work 10 more years so they can retire are afraid that that's going to be compromised. And young people that haven't started families or completed their education, they just don't know what is going to happen to them, or their hopes and dreams. And all of that is driving everything that you see happening right now. The fear, the sheer terror that people have about their life ground being challenged or what they need to take their next step. And I think it's really beautiful that in the middle of all of that, that artists have decided to press on and create, and that singers are still singing, and that DJs are still lighting up Instagram,
Hmm.
and people are still protesting in the streets. I think it's a beautiful testament to the endurance and the grit of the human spirit.
Can you also just talk briefly about the term life ground, which you and I got to talk about recently?
Yeah, I saw this doctor talk about life ground and how people respond. And I think that's apropos for this moment, right? How people respond when their life ground is being challenged. And he defined life ground as what you need as a human being to be able to take your next breath or your next step. And so when you don't have a job, when you don't know if your governor is going to uh, end eviction protections, when you don't know if your school will require you to come into that building and risk your life or allow you to be safe at home and take classes online when you don't know what job you're going to be able to get to pay off your student loans so that you'll have to choose between having a car, having a nice home, or renting a room so that you can pay your student loans. Right now, the life ground of so many humans is being challenged. And I don't think it's something that maybe other more developing countries have had experience with. In recent history, we haven't had the experience of having our life ground challenged on this many levels here in the United States. And people are responding in very scary ways, very scary ways.
Thanks. The Tati, what comes to mind?
About this moment.
Yeah.
Um, I was just thinking, like, um, specifically about this movement. Um, a lot of people are talking about like COVID, and they say like, um, I can't wait till we can get back to normal. Like I can't wait until we can go back to the clubs, and I can't wait until we can go back to the beach. I can't wait till we don't have to wear a mask. And I think the sad thing about this movement is that this is normal. That when we go back to no more COVID, normal life, there will still be people dying in the streets by police. And like, I think that's a shock that I like deal with all the time when people say that, because like when everything goes back to normal, this work will still have to be done. And so now that we're post Jacob Blake, um, and we've been in the streets for months now, it just feels like we're at a standstill. And the question keeps coming of how do we get across the other side where we just aren't dying and it's continuously on TV, and we always have to go back into the streets, and we have to write in our posters, Black Lives Matter, why are you killing us? How do we get them to just stop that? And I feel like this moment, and I hope I'm not speaking for anybody, but alongside many, when I say that this moment feels like we're no longer willing to wait for change. It's over. Like enough is enough. And I don't know what path that may lead us on to, but I think that people are done watching their their own people die and just sit and wait for change and ask for change and ask for justice. I think that this moment feels like enough is enough, and I just don't know what may come of that.
It's interesting because I feel in my conversations with you recently, and even talking about what we might talk about today, there is a push and pull between having to hit the same ideas over and over and over again, right? Because survival compels you know three or four ideas over and over and over again, and it can embody, it can make it can feel that that how does the conversation expand or advance when the structure is the same or worse, right?
Right.
And
Well,
go ahead.
if you were talking to Chris Hedges and you asked him that question, he would say it's the oligarchy, right? It's a small group of people globally who have a concentration of resources and control over a government organization or institution. And I think people are trying to figure out right now, and I think I'm going to say it because it needs to be said. People are trying to figure out how to effect a nonviolent coup of the existing oligarchy. The next conversation that people are going to have is how, and this is always the progression of revolution. The first conversation. That's why we say we send young men, we send old men for counsel and young men for war. And so at this moment, the elders are conversing about how we can avoid going over the cliff of civil unrest and all of the things people have been threatening over the last 20 years. Because nobody really wants that. Like, no sane person really wants to see their society in such upheaval that we cannot procure the life ground that we discussed earlier. But increasingly falling on my ears is the question and the conversation, people wanting to engage in the conversation about the next question. And the next question is, how do we effect an overthrow of the oligarchy by whatever means we can avail of to ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever means we can procure is the word I want. And so I think that there are a lot of people right now, there are a lot of peaceniks. I used to be one of them who will say something like, oh, well, you have to do this nonviolent. You just have to. And I just keep asking the question, like, how do you do that when you're outgunned, when your city, your county sheriff has tanks? And I remember LA said they're going to give back all but one of their flamethrowers. And I'm thinking, what the hell do you need to buy like that to wage a war?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when do you say, you know what, today I'm going to have a ham sandwich and I'm going to get my flamethrower? You can even use
Right.
that for the trip, just in case, you never know. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, when do you need a flamethrower? When do you need a ballistic proof tank? Because all our county governments, just about every county government in the country has war making equipment. And so, what do people do when you're paying taxes or going to this black hole? You're being forced to send your kid to a failing school. This is how revolutions get started. I mean, if you don't want people to start thinking these things and having these conversations, and people are now getting killed in the streets. This is no longer just a conversation that people are having. People are dying.
Right.
From the moment that Heather died in North Carolina with the Tiki Torches, remember the Tiki Torch March? Heather Heyer.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the moment that she died, because we have to say her name, right?
Mm-hmm.
The moment that she died was the beginning of the potentials of a civil war. When people are dying on their own soil for rights that they or others are not getting, we call that war. And we don't want to use, when people are tossing about the tools of war, I want to be very careful about invoking that type of language. Because honestly, like I said, nobody wants to go there. But if we don't see changes and there isn't some relief soon, I don't think that we, BLM, are able to suppress that conversation. And I'm becoming increasingly unsure if we should. And you're talking to someone who uh, has been a part of Peace Day on the global scale for many years. Someone who is currently studying Kingian nonviolent resistance. But I don't think we can keep things off the table when it doesn't seem that the conversation is taking us anywhere. George Floyd, we fired and arrested his killers. We still have these killings happening. There's been no deterrent to shooting a man in the back 7 times or pulling a guy over on his bike for a citation and killing him, as happened today, this morning. So I don't know where this moment is going to take us, and it's going to piggyback on Tati. I don't know where this moment is going to take us, but something has to give. We're critical mass.
Tati?
Oh no, I was just saying definitely, completely agree. Um, yeah.
Well, okay, so that makes me think about your current initiatives, right? And there's an idea of like what Black Lives Matter Tampa has been, in the last few years or the few months, and the last sort of um, one conversation I was really interested in is this conversation around mental health that you guys initiated a clinic last month, correct?
Yeah.
And this gets back to you brought up suicide as this sort of lingering. I mean, the suicide, mental health. This is the world's worst irritant, right? What's happening right now, as you guys described at the beginning of the conversation, all these sort of layered violences and precarity. And so, yeah, could you speak a bit to that first clinic that you set up, and I imagine too, like you had an idea, like here's our goals, and then here's who showed up. Here's like you're probably at the beginning of getting it spread to the communities. Um, and yeah, so I thought that would be a more discrete thing we could talk about briefly, just because that's like a recent program.
Yeah, so people are struggling right now, and our activists, advocates, organizers, even protesters, and people at home that can't do any of those things suffer from the images that they see, and have many people have a sense of helplessness about wanting to stop the pain and the death and feeling powerless to do so. And then that creates frustration, which then creates other feelings and can lead to depression, anxiety, and other personality disorders, and feelings of angst. And without a comprehensive healthcare grid, it becomes very difficult for people to know what to do with that. Because of our work, we feel somewhat responsible for to use our platform to disseminate information on how people can cope with the feelings and their mental health, improve their mental health, as they continue to see these things or engage in the work. And so, one of our supporters, Jennifer Ferris Young, is a therapist in Oldsmar, which is on the other side of the bridge. We're here in Tampa, there in Pinellas County. And she offered us, she says, "Hey, I'm a therapist, let me know whatever I can do." And I said, it'd be really great if you could do some type of uh, seminar that we could put on Zoom, and as many people as would want the information or the help or the guidance could get it. So our first workshop was trauma informed trauma management for the activists, and that was intended to encompass all of the folks that we were talking about before, the activists, advocates, organizers, people at home, protesters, who are affected by the images of Black death and the sense that our society is in some sort of irreversible decline. And so we had it. We had about 48 people that hopped on. It was great. There was a lot of follow up. A lot of people were like, "Dang, I missed it. When are you having the next one?" And then because we kind of got overwhelmed with a lot of needs, community needs, and like 500 backpacks that we just completed, there was like, so we thought we'd do 100 backpacks, but of course, because of the economy, the demand was overwhelming. Even with all the other backpack drives that go on this time of the year, we're still getting requests and we're still fulfilling them. And so our next trauma management series, or mental health care series, is intergenerational trauma, and how to have conversations about it, how to seek closure on some of these damaging relationships within our family units, and there's a lot of excitement and anticipation for that particular um, uh, seminar, online seminar, and that if the interest in the seminar is any indication, it should be even more well attended than the first.
And you had talked about right, like you had the first clinic, and then there's this sort of back to school economic and material need, right? So you guys
Right.
are uh, briefly pulled away from that work, and then are you planning on doing? I think you said, or I heard that there was like a first Friday um, of the month. Like, was do you guys have a kind of timetable for in?
Yeah, that particular the health screening day, like I said, we kind of got sideswiped by the backpacks. We just didn't know the demand would be as high. We had this neat little plan where we were going to have kick off our first citywide health screening day, free. Everything's free.
Mm-hmm.
What we did took all of the interests, and our medic corps is kind of like a bucking bronco. You know, it's full of doctors and nurses and medical students, nursing students, therapists and physical trainers, physical therapists, occupational, just wanted to apply their training and education to helping. And so they came out to protest. And then our one of our anti-racism educators, Liz Lanier, who worked with Surge, is a group of white people that do uh, anti-racism training for other white people who want to learn how to be allies to the movement. And Liz is our nurse attorney and anti-racism educator. She says, "Listen, I've got these people, and they're just like, when's the next one? When's the next one?" And I said, "Well, what else can we do with them?" And someone came up with the idea for, I think Marcus Kleba came up with the idea for a free health screening day. And so he has enlisted all of these medical professionals, allied healthcare professionals, to come in and screen people for diabetes. We hope to get ophthalmologists to come in and screen for vision. We're screening for cholesterol, high blood pressure. We're doing body BMI testing so that people can know, if they're facing particular health complications because of obesity, which complicates so many health conditions, including COVID. And so we're actually literally doing this work to kind of bridge the gap between services that people don't have because they've lost their jobs, if their health insurance went with it, they can't afford Cobra on the reduced salary. And so we're stepping into that breach and basically corralling these volunteers because without them, that we just couldn't meet those needs. And then referring people to low cost, no cost, even insurance programs that they may not have been aware of, so that we can keep people alive through this whole thing, right? Like when we say Black Lives Matter. Also, what may be interesting to people who are listening to this is that we we say Black Lives Matter, and by the extension, all lives. Because when the most marginalized lives are brought into the margins and cared for and valued, then we will have completed the mosaic. And
Right.
so when we are serving people, when Black Lives Matter has a free dental day or a health screening day or therapy sessions online, backpacks are being given out. The people who come to receive those services come from every ethnic demographic in this city. We do not turn people away.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that recently, and I think that hearing that over and over um, gets to the intersectional more pattern of support and values that this movement is pushing forward. So in terms of if somebody wants to support the work you're doing, um, we you know, how do they, if they're in the Tampa or even across the nation, um, you guys have a few literal fundraising things happening right now. Like you just have a line of T-shirts out, correct?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
in yard signs. And is there something else that I was missing besides those two things of like the sort of new releases?
I mean, we also have a bail fund. As it happens, like with last week, that bail fund encompasses things like we had a car protest because we wanted to be able to engage people who are immunocompromised, who have mobility challenges, and so we had a car protest where people could remain safe in their cars. And so we saw a lot of older people and people who said, "Hey, I haven't been able to participate. This is great."
Yeah.
But when we got down into one town and we took both sides of the street, the police waited until after the event and then kind of followed people out of the area and gave them tickets. And so our bail out of our bail fund, those tickets are like $150 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
We pay tickets. We try to find a lawyer so that we can make the points go away, so that people don't get they're not driving recklessly. They're using their First Amendment right to protest, and that's a form of police harassment because it was a victimless crime, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the type of thing that the monies in our bail fund go to. The monies in our general fund goes to things like printing. We don't take salaries. 100% of that money, I would say, probably a fraction of a percent might go to something like um, a canvasser. I mean, not a canvasser. An organizer says, "Hey, I want to drive down to Ruskin, but I just can't afford it." They get a gas card. But other than small instances like that, all of this money goes back into backpacks and scientific calculators, or stipends for our organizers who are often giving up work hours to do this work to help them make ends meet so that we can keep bodies and hands and minds and hearts on this thing. And so that money goes to the Florida Council of Churches, and they act as our fiduciary sponsor. And so anyone who wanted to donate money would talk to Dr. Meyer, Reverend Dr. Meyer, who would take those funds and disperse them as needed to the organization.
Yeah, Reverend Dr. Meyer is the bank basically.
It's the bank.
Yeah.
That's where all the money.
Right. So I'm gonna add a link to on our website and to our Facebook a link to his email so people know if they want to support the work that you guys are doing where to send it, as well as links.
Jason, I can send you a link if you want one.
I would love it. Thank you. Good to have you here.
Yeah, sorry, I've been on Zoom the whole day. Just took a break to take pizza to my granddaughter.
Yeah, well, Zoom is its own numbing fatigue. It's like definitely
Yeah,
a slow violence, a new kind of slow violence, in a sense.
yeah.
Um, well, um, okay, two big, beautiful questions for you, Tati and Donna, which is a conversation that we kind of stumbled upon, and I'm really excited to get into for a moment. And it's drawn on sort of, I don't know, ideas and feelings that I've had over the years. And I was really excited to see that there was a little bit of a gate opening when we started talking about this. Is this idea that when we live in a context of systematic racism, oppression, and violence, um, there's a huge there's a huge loss of what otherwise might be senses of humanity, people going into the world and trying to find meaning beyond the most basic levels of survival. And uh, for every activist, um, there might be this idea, or something that Tati, you and I have talked about, is this idea of sort of like the activist as like a brand, or this like a sort of celebrity. And some of what I think about earlier is this idea of like sort of sugar activism versus protein activism, right? That's maybe another little metaphor to use. And people's lives are complex, and they go in and out of you know how they spend their time and what feels important. Um, you guys are in it to win it, and I wanted to ask you. Well, maybe a good way to start this conversation is, Donna, you talked about Toni Morrison talking to Charlie Rose, and I think that was a moment, um, that maybe if you could relay that is like a way to get this our last conversation point started.
Okay. So I was watching Charlie Rose show. Toni Morrison's on, and she says to him, he says to her, um, "I write the book that I wanted to read." Right? And people say, "What are you going to write about?" And you write, and she says, "Are you asking, these other authors this?" And she says, if I had found the book that I wanted to read, I'd not have written it. And I am doing exactly what I want to be doing. And she says, so many people get caught up in the notion that someone says you haven't got a culture. And so you spend 20 years researching and writing to prove that you have a culture. And then someone else says that you haven't got this. And then you spend another decade proving that you've got that. What would you be doing if you didn't feel compelled to do any of those things? So I had like a little mini nervous breakdown when I heard that question, because I mean, any human being, my gosh, in their entire life has an entire list, laundry list of things, a bucket list they call it, of things they want to do. When you're in the streets on the hottest day God ever made, sweating out your minerals and your sodium and potassium, and your feet hurt and your back hurt, and you've been up for 3 days because you don't want your community to not be safe. Because the whole idea is to have this protest as leverage to elected officials and anyone who makes decisions, including police officers, about how these lives are handled. You want to send a message to them that there is innumerable support for these ideas. And so you're doing this work because you have to do this work. You're doing this work because you feel compelled to. But what about, seeing the Leaning Tower of Pisa? What about seeing Mount Fuji? What about seeing, Kilimanjaro? What about seeing Zulu dancers in the south of Africa? You know, what about the place of no return in Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire. I mean, there's so many things that a person could be doing. It's just seeing Niagara Falls. And I'm not doing those things because I spend 40, 60, sometimes 90 hours in a 7 or 8 day period doing this, right? I'm not talking to my son. I'm not spending time with my husband sitting on a bench and enjoying the weather. You know, I am not sitting next to my father's bedside when he died because I was standing on a stage talking to 7,000 people that I'd organized. And I didn't feel like I could go to his bedside. And I felt like my dad would say, go get their asses, do what God made you to do.
Yeah.
And so the question that I ask myself all the time is, what are you giving up? And as someone who's been a hospice worker and who's read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I can tell you that people, when life ends, people think the same things. They regret the same things. They wish they had or had not done very similar things. And I'm wondering, because we don't know, we're living in the specter of death with COVID. I don't know if I'm using my time in a way that when I lay down to transition,
Mm-hmm.
that I'll be able to say, I feel good about that. I don't know.
Thank you. I I feel now that we've talked about this, this is the kind of thing I want to ask all sorts of activists. I think that's like a conversation that doesn't happen enough, and it puts all the work that you guys are doing into a new relief. Or as talking to Tati last night, it's sort of like clicking on Google Maps, right? I'm in Street View and I'm in aerial view. And
Yeah.
man, I kind of thought, Donna, when you and I stumbled into this conversation, I was like, whoa, I was not ready for this aerial view. And it was really eye opening. So, Tati, yeah, I invite you to share, like, given this different kind of prompt than you might get normally, I'd like to hear your response.
um, so we talked about this last night when the prompt was given to me. I was like, oh, this is different. Like this is something that I definitely have never had to talk about. Um, like on a platform like this. Like me and Donna often talk about like will we ever see the results of our work? And that's something that like when I decide to get in my little poetic space in my head, I sit in bed and I'm like, wow, this is depressing. Like, will we ever see this? You know? Um, and I try to think of what I would be doing if not this. And I don't know, like that question is so captivating. I think like being 22 years old, I can't really think of a life where these issues and this fight doesn't exist. For most of my life, it was really about surviving through those margins of class or race or gender. Um, and I mean, I can tell you that I'd rather not be doing this because it's exhausting, but I can't tell you what else I would rather be doing. I would rather be like in South Africa on a beach, but then I can't. Then like the thing in my mind comes back, and I'm like, is that real? Like if I was actually there, wouldn't I be thinking about like the kids over here that don't have food, or the kids over here that don't have shoes, or the people on the street? You know, like it just never leaves my mind how hard it is for marginalized people. And like I think maybe that's the crazy part of all of this is that the issues are so deep and real, encompassing, that it just has defined my whole life for me. I can't think of what else I'd be doing, but I know I'd rather be doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad that we can't have that because we're sitting here trying to protect the most basic thing, which is life. Like these are our rights as people, right? It's in the Constitution, like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we are constantly meeting together. We're constantly up at 4 in the morning, and we're just doing all of this to protect life. We haven't even gotten to the point of where we're talking about do we deserve happiness? Do we deserve to pursue happiness? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I can't think of anything else that I'd be doing, and that makes me sad.
The um, well, I want to thank you guys for your time. Uh, is there anything else while we're on the platform? We have like a archive version rolling right now, and is there anything else that you want to, I guess you could say, put on tape before we break?
I think a lot of people, because that last conversation is difficult for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I get very emotional about it because we've got but one life to live, right? And there's a line in Walt Whitman's like one book that he wrote where he says, "I alone am enough. I suffice. I alone am enough." I think I got that right. And when we have this conversation about what we would be doing and the value of human life, specifically Black life, but not without consideration for all human life. I mean, the sanctity of life, of Black lives, is rooted in the sanctity of life writ large, right? And so our lives matter too, like our dreams and our hopes and the things that we're seeking to save young people from. Something as simple as making a return when there is a satisfaction guarantee policy hanging on the wall, and something as simple as making a return inside the valid number of days, as the stated policy is, can turn into a nightmare for a Black person that finds someone with a lot of preconceived notions about them on the other side of the counter. That happened to me today. Um, and so I almost didn't even take it back because I didn't know, if that would happen. And it happened. And I would want people who are watching this to think about, we're doing this work so that people can walk through this world with the dignity that our founding charters purport to seek to procure for all lives. We know that really wasn't meant for people who weren't white and male and fully abled and weren't cis heterosexual, uh, and we're still suffering from that. But just imagine if you were to wake up one morning and everywhere you went, you said, "Hey, I'm a human being and I'm here to fill in the blank with whatever the task, whether it's school or a bank or a library or post office." And they said, "Yes, but you'll have to wait over there until we've taken care of all of the first class customers, and then we'll take care of the second class line." Just imagine if you had to walk through your entire life like that. And you think it's an exaggeration? You have no idea what it's like to walk in those shoes, right? You have no idea. They've never walk a mile in man's moccasins, right? Before you make these assessments.
Hmm.
People don't know what it's like to wonder if you're going to survive a traffic stop. I see people saying, "Well, officer, blah, blah." I would never think that that was something that I could get away with. I worry about when my husband doesn't show up when he said he was going to be at home. I wonder if my son is all right on a campus where 96% of the kids are white. I worry about things that someone said to me last week. "Oh, well, I think all of these lawyers can carry their water." I mean, it's like I would let a Trump supporter do a vasectomy on me.
Hmm.
Well, statistics say if you're Black and a white doctor delivers your baby is 350 times more likely to die than if a Black doctor is taking care of that baby. So that logic doesn't work for me. That
Hmm.
worked for that white male.
Hmm.
And people give these things no consideration. The same way people who are able bodied don't think about what it is to be a person with different abilities, with different capacities, mental capacities. People don't think of this. We live in a society that almost entirely lacks empathy in its moral construct. And you can see it in how deeply divided we are. And so the thing that I would say to people is to, when you look at another person, the same way the people didn't know that Chadwick Boseman was dying of cancer. They made fun
Hmm.
of him. They called him a crackhead, made terrible jokes about him, Crack Panther. And he was literally trying to give us his best, even as he knew he was dying. That's a society that lacks Twitter and the Coliseum, the where the gladiators fight is like Twitter and Facebook. When people say, "I'm glad he's dead," there's just simply no respect for human life. So when you're a person who is Black, a person who is female, a person who is trans, it's very important for us to stop and try to put ourselves in those people's shoes and try to empathize with our fellow human beings. It's the only way this world can change. Because in order to be able to speak to each other, to really hear each other, we've got to empathize with each other's conditions. I hate to be on a soapbox, but it's really what I think of as being at the bottom of what ails us currently. And I
Yeah.
just hope that more people.
Yeah. And this is that is ongoing daily rest of your life homework for everybody, all of us. I'm so happy to have had you guys as guests here, and thank thank you. Uh,
Thank you.
Sebrin.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry,
And
I was like monitoring the feed and doing technical stuff in the
yeah,
background here,
Sebrin,
but
thanks for
thank
keeping an eye on
you so much.
multiple screens.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, this is some New York, Florida solidarity right now. Um,
Yeah.
so, and
So
go Tati, please.
sorry. I just want to thank you guys for like the space for us, and creating this space in general. I think that it's privileged of many of us to not have these thoughts to create a space for people who have disabilities, for people who are immunocompromised, for people who have situations like are undocumented and may not be able to come out and protest and
Right.
risk their lives like that. I think that this is what makes this movement different from ones in the past. That we have people thinking this way. We have people bringing everyone in from the margins, because all voices do matter here. So I want to thank you guys for creating this space and giving us the opportunity to speak on this platform, because most media platforms just want that soundbite. So I really do appreciate it a lot.
Thanks.
Well,
I'm
we appreciate you for participating and giving your voice to this work and being a part of this broadcast. And we're gonna record anything that we do event wise on here. We're gonna record and put it into an archive that will be available from the page of this website too. So ideally, it'll be an ongoing and building library of voices and of different people who wanna use it and participate in the project. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I would just add like this project like I'm like Black Lives Matter Tampa, you have goals, but then I feel like every conversation I have with you guys is teaching me like what is you know, there's two possibilities of maybe projects like this. One is just about imagination, like speculation. What would it look like if people, through the use of a smartphone, could um, magically appear in the same space and time, although like not physical space and time. And then there's and sometimes as artists you doubt, in an era where there's you're looking, you know, that imaginative space has a certain role, and then there's like utility. And I'm thinking that these conversations are what I'm realizing are in a way maybe competing for the center of the project. I had no idea that that would happen. Right? And that the imaginative space is almost a satellite of the conversations. I don't know. I'm learning every day about the way that this how a project like this could function. Talk soon,
Yeah.
guys. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Reverend Dr. Meyer. Nice to have you.